Our Knight Rider Historians YouTube channel has been growing quite a bit as of late. Thanks to all of you for watching, giving us your feedback, and just embracing us. We love it, and it drives us to bring you more exciting content. To that end, we've asked two of our good friends, Jacob Pedersen and Eric Wang, if they would like to be contributors to this channel, and they both happily agreed. Both Jacob and Eric will be bringing you some neat content soon, in addition to the stuff that we are already producing. To kick it off, Jacob graciously offered to upload his April 2020 interview with Knight Rider Stunt Coordinator Jack Gill for you all to enjoy.
Welcome to this interview with Jack Gill. Jack, let me start by saying it's an honor to have the opportunity to talk to you. You're a long-time stuntman, stunt coordinator, second unit director, and you served movie and TV fans a wide variety of breathtaking stunts over the past many years. Jack, you've been nominated, you've won numerous stunt awards. So in a simple word, Jack, you are a legend in stunts and movie making. And for all you viewers, you can see Jack's current work in Bad Boys for Life. So you're definitely still going strong. Is that right?
Yeah, still going strong. I mean, it's with the virus, it's definitely shut us all down, but we're all real anxious to go back to work.
Yeah, I can understand that. And with your catalog of exciting tasks, there are so many great things that I could talk to you about. But in this interview, we are going to focus on your time as a stuntman, stunt coordinator, and second unit director on Knight Rider from 1982 to 1986. And if anyone of the viewers, Knight Rider fans out there, if they do not know it, you are actually on screen as well. You played Dugan in the episode Inside Out from the first season. Actually, I think the first episode to be filmed. You played Jack in second season, Return to Cadiz. Paul Lacroix in Ring of Fire, also from the second season. And finally, you are actually the limo driver getting blown up in the beginning of third season episode Buyout. So I think there's a lot of us Knight Rider fans who really crave for more behind the scenes stories. I fell in love with Kit when I was 10, and come to think of it, you were the one who actually brought to life Kit's fantastic abilities. So all of the thrill, we owe it to you, Jack Gill. But I think let's get to it. I have a lot of questions, as I said, I'm extremely honored by having this interview and this chance to talk to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to talk a bit about your a typical week on set when during the 4 years. How did it go? When did you start recording and working in the day? Did you have any days off? And then also a lot about your tasks, different tasks as stunt driver, stunt coordinator, and second unit director. Can you enlighten us a bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, when we first started off shooting Kit and David Hasselhoff, we thought, essentially it's going to be more about David Hasselhoff and less about the car. But as we started getting into like our, probably second or third episode, we found out that the car was just as important as David Hasselhoff's character. And so everything started to build from that, from the camaraderie between the two characters. And it became its own kind of entity. And once it became its own entity, it was kind of me being Kit in the seat the whole time, trying to figure out what we can do that's interesting to make Kit look like a real character. And so we had a lot to do with story. We had a lot to do. We'd all sit down at the table and start talking about, different things we could do with the car and things that were funny and things that were, he could get David Hasselhoff out of trouble. And from that, from all the writers and the producers and the directors, we came up with kind of a floor plan of saying in each and every episode, we're going to have David trying to thwart the bad guy, and somewhere along the line, Kit has to help him. And that's kind of the basis of how we built every single one of them so that they become victorious at the end. And so it was a feel-good TV series, and one that, when we first started, it started out kind of easygoing in that, David's going to fight the bad guys and Kit's just going to drive him around and talk to him. But it became more of a partnership. And the partnership blossomed after that into becoming, Kit saved David from a lot of things. And, it was a fantastic character in that it's a non-entity type character. And I never thought a talking car would ever go as big as it did. But But the fact that people really understood that, we were way ahead of the curve back then. Nobody really thought there was really going to be talking cars. And look at us now. We've got cars that talk to us and cars that drive us. And it's kind of the same thing. But back then we were kind of the cutting edge.
Great. How about your different roles on the show? You were driving the car. You were also a coordinator. Can you tell us a bit about the different roles you had?
Yeah, I mean, I started off simply just doubling Hasselhoff and driving the car and driving Kit. And then about 6 months to 8 months into it, they wanted me to be the stunt coordinator and second unit director, which is an action director. And when I took that on, that was overwhelming. It was, you're running between trying to do 4 different jobs at once. And I had to bring in guys to try and do some of the work that I was doing. So I brought my brother in, Antti Gill, and he drove the car some of the time and jumped the car some of the time. And then I had Joel Kramer doubling Hasselhoff outside the car and doing the fights. And we had a lot of other drivers for the car when I was directing. But when I was a stunt coordinator, I was pretty much driving the car the whole time and doubling Hasselhoff. And there were times when, David is 6'4" and I'm only 6 feet tall, but I did double him outside the car a few different times, only because we just didn't have, we ended up writing some big action sequence at the last minute, and I didn't have somebody 6'4" on the set. So I ended up doubling Hasselhoff and nobody seemed to know the difference. I couldn't do a stand-up fight with another guy. But if it was an explosion or if it was jumping off of something, or like I did a high fall off of a building and landed in Kit from 6 stories, that kind of stuff I could get away with, but not when we were standing up toe to toe. I had to bring somebody else in to double him. But the great part about being able to jockey between all those different positions is that I kind of knew where everything was going to go. I knew exactly what I wanted to do and how to do it. And the studio gave me free reign to do whatever we wanted to do. And if we thought something would work better that wasn't in the script, they were all for it. As long as it didn't cost them more money, they were fine with it. So that was the great part about Knight Rider, is that you could change things on the fly. And that's very difficult to do in today's world. We can't really change things without sitting down and have meetings with 25, 30 people.
Yeah. Okay. How many people were on the stunt team of Knight Rider?
I mean, it varied, but we never had less than probably 8. And sometimes we had 25 or 30. It all depends on how big the sequence was and how many people we had in the background. And you have to remember, back then, we didn't have any way to remove cables and change things CGI-wise that they can do now. Everything was what you saw is what you got. So when I had to fly people on wires, which, like, there was a sequence where we ejected Hasselhoff out of the car up in the air, and I think it was a ejection seat in the passenger seat. We had to throw a guy up in the air, and there were no cables on that guy. We had to just pitch him up in the air and hope he landed behind the car, and we padded the ground enough that it didn't hurt him. But at that time, nobody had ever done that kind of stuff before. It was kind of like the James Bond ejection seat in Goldfinger, but they did it with a dummy and we did it with real people.
Yeah. When you are on the set and you have to make a stunt scene, how does that work? I've always wondered, when are the actors actually there, or don't you see them very much? How is all that made when you are making a stunt scene? Some of it, I guess, can be made without the actors from the show, and you need them for some of the other scenes. How did that work on Knight Rider?
Well, when we had an action unit working, we usually worked 3 days to 4 days a week. And the acting unit, which is the first unit with Hasselhoff, they would work, 5 to 6 days a week per episode. Yeah. So if I would finish a big jump sequence where Kit jumps over something and lands, we would make sure we knew where the car hit, where it ended up, where he has to meet the next either bad guy or good guy or whatever it is. And we would map that all, take a bunch of pictures, and then David would show up the next day, and we would then stop our action unit, and we would bring all the stunt guys in and overlap the beginning of the stunt and then the end of the stunt for the dialogue and shoot all of that. So they would come in for a couple of hours and then leave, and we would go back to doing our action unit again.
Okay, yeah. You learned David how to drive, as I understand it. How much did he get to use those abilities during the show? Was he allowed to drive the car? I think in one place I actually read him saying that he was in the car during a turbo boost. Is that do you know if that's correct?
No, I mean, he never did any of the jumps. He did a couple of mini ramp jumps, which are smaller jumps. I mean, to the mainstream public, a mini ramp jump is still a pretty big jump because you're flying, 40 to 60 feet through the air,
Yeah.
4.5 feet and it's 40 to 60 feet is a long way, for a natural human to fly a car through the air. Now, on our big jumps, we're going 140 feet, long and 20 feet high. But David was a great driver. It took me probably 3 episodes to get him comfortable in the car. And you have to understand that David was driving with that big T-bar steering wheel, which was very difficult to drive with because that was our hero car. I didn't have that steering wheel. I had a little round steering wheel that I could whip around pretty easily. But since when we shot David, you could see the steering wheel, he had to drive with a T steering wheel. So it was a different kind of a skill set for David. Is when I taught him, we were always in the hero car and we were in a parking lot trying to teach him how to do 180s and do reverse 180s and slide the car to a stop and to hit a mark. And he was a fast learner. I mean, he was one of the guys that really wanted to learn and understood the parameters of it. And so those kind of guys are fun to teach because they're kind of like a sponge. They really soak up everything and are really, happy to be there. There's some actors when you try and teach them that they think they understand everything in the first 10 minutes and just want to go back to their dressing room. And David wasn't like that. He wanted to spend every waking minute out, on the parking lot trying to learn to drive. And so that's why he became such a great driver.
Okay, how was your relationship with the main characters? I think almost everything I read about the show is saying that there was a very good atmosphere during the production of the series.
Yeah, I mean, we had a family kind of attitude about it all because we were all so close, and the fact that with any TV series, you're spending a lot of time together. I mean, you're there at 6:30 in the morning, you're not leaving till 8 or 9 at night, and all you really do is go home and grab dinner and go to sleep and get up and do it again. And so for us, since we spent that much time together, even when we wrapped at night, we would hang around and everybody would have kind of dinner on the set together and you'd have a quick bite to eat, talk about what you did and what you're going to do the next day, and then go home. So you got to know everybody really well. And even the actors that came in just for one episode kind of always commented on how we were kind of a family, and they missed that. They would love to be a character on the show where they were in, every single episode because it was like I had brothers and sisters on the show, and the fact that we're risking people's lives every week. And that was a big part of it. All the stunt people on the show, they were a big part of that episode because you're out there risking your life for a TV show. And we did have a few injuries, but nothing drastic and nothing bad. But with, action, that's kind of what happens. They're paying you to do things that no one else wants to do.
Yeah.
And so, we had times where it was very dangerous. And I had to call up Hasselhoff saying, what we're doing is we're getting ready to do something really dangerous. So I'm going to keep you on the line and I'll call you the second we know everything's okay. And so that's kind of what we did is you kind of kept the family in the loop.
Yeah. So your relations with Edward, with Patricia, Rebecca, and David. Maybe just a few words on that. Can you do that?
Well, the funny part about them is that I really only ever saw them when either we had a fight to do, in either Night Industries or in some location, or we were going to drive Kit into the semi and they had built a portion of Patricia's or Rebecca's set inside the semi, and I'd come flying into a real semi at speed and have to stop this thing right before I got to them. And Edward and Rebecca or Patricia were really wide-eyed when I came in there because there's no cables on the car, and I'm coming in at 40 miles an hour and having to stop this thing in 5 feet. And I got close a lot of times, but never hit the set and never hit them. But I could see it in their eyes that they were scared of this, 4,500-pound steel car coming in at speed. And I've got nowhere to go but right at them. And I did that a bunch of times. And I got to say, in today's world, they would never let you do that.
Oh. Okay, coming to another subject, the cars of the stunt team. I've talked to some other Knight Rider enthusiasts, and some of the questions that are really coming again and again is how many cars were smashed during the show. Have you got an estimate on how many cars you smashed during the show?
Well, we probably went through easily 40 to 60 kit cars a year, because every single jump, because it didn't have a main frame to it, the frame bent very easily. So the good part about it is that Pontiac gave us the cars for $1 a piece, and they were usually water damaged cars because we were going to take all the electronics out of it anyway and build the engine up. So we would get cars that were pretty, beat up, and then we would make them into a kit car. And the great part about getting them for $1 a piece is that sometimes I had, 10 to 15 kit cars on the set that would do a variety of different things. One would be set up strictly for really high speed, up above 150 miles an hour on the desert. And then some would be set up for being turns inside the city where I had a lot of horsepower and I could do a lot with a car, but it never went faster than maybe 100. And they all had different things that they would do. And I can remember taking Kit down in the LA River, which was, probably 2 or 3 feet of water, and sliding around in this, riverbed. And I never had any problems with the car stopping or dying out or anything. And so they were all set up very, very well. And had we not gotten the cars from Pontiac for $1 a piece, I don't think the studio would have supplied me with that many cars to be able to have each and every one to do something different.
So it was kind of a playground for you.
It was. And the fact that when we first got our set of cars, they literally came to me and said, okay, you've got all these cars. Tell me what you want to do with them. And I was like a kid in a candy store, just sitting down at night, writing, each and everything that the car needed to do. And then a week later, there they all were. They were all set up.
Okay. How much did repair work did you do on the cars? We have seen some blooper outtakes on YouTube showing that the cars are damaged. How much repair work did you do on them? Were they just thrashed if they were smashed, or did you repair them?
Well, we would do kind of superficial repairing on the set if we just banged something. But in all of the big jumps, the car came apart and you had to use another car. If the landing didn't look like what you wanted, if you could see parts coming off, since we didn't have CGI to fix that, I would have to come in and do another mini ramp landing to show the car landing without parts coming off. And the car that I jumped would then go to the parts yard, but yet it would be ready the next day and fixed. The jump cars wouldn't. The jump cars were pretty much trashed, and we would throw them away and pull the engine and pull all the parts that we could to use on the new cars. But if I did a jump that came out pretty well, which sometimes they landed really nice, in the dirt, we could just replace a few parts and I'd have the car back the next day. So you just never could tell how it was going to land and what was going to come off.
Okay. What was the worst accident you had on Knight Rider? Do you remember during a stunt scene?
Well, I think it's hard to say. I mean, there's a lot of things that happened that you don't really know that it went the wrong way, when there were things that you try to think of everything that go wrong, and you try and think of, if something happens in the middle of this, what do I do? In the stunt world, everything can go wrong. There's a million things that can happen. And in Knight Rider, the great part about what we did is that everybody was a family, and we sat down before we did stunt sequences, and everybody talked about what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, and what was going to happen. But one of the things that happened to me was what I talked about previously, about doing that 6-story high fall and landing in the kit car. What you see is I jump out of a building and go straight toe. It's like I'm jumping feet first down through the shot and land in an extended seat that comes out of the top of the Knight Rider car. So the chair is sitting up out of the T-tops. I hit the seat and land in the car, and David drives away. So what we had done is we had taken the kit car and putting it up on the top of a car carrier. And a car carrier is like what you see when the cars are carried to new dealers. They're double deck car carriers. So this Knight Rider car is sitting up on the second level of a car carrier. And the camera shot the car without seeing the car carrier. That means that the bottom of the lens just mapped out the bottom of the car carrier. All you see is from the wheels up. So you don't see the car carrier, and it's against the side of the building. So I have to drop by the car at speed and hit the airbag on the other side of the car carrier. Well, I had done it 3 times, and every time I did it, the director said, well, it looks like you're landing on your back. You're landing flat when you go by the car. You have to go through my frame like a pencil, straight up and down. And I said, well, I have to go flat into the bag or I'm going to get hurt. And he goes, well, it's not working. You have to go, like a pencil. So the next take, which was the 4th take, I stayed straight up and down all the way through the frame and got through the frame and, ended up breaking my neck. And I didn't know at the time my neck was broken. It was just a hairline fracture, but I knew I had hurt something. And when I got out of the airbag, I was kind of holding my neck, and they put my head in, a neck collar. And I went to the hospital, and they said, yeah, you fractured your neck. And as bad as that seems, it was just a mild crack, and it healed in 6 weeks. And I could still drive, and I could still do everything else, but I couldn't do major jumps for about 2 months. So things like that happen. And it's just things that as a stuntman, you just have to do. And you hope that you don't get paralyzed or hurt worse than what it was.
Okay, coming to the turbo boost, when I sit down and see the show, and I do that a lot, I still get, this feeling in the stomach whenever a kid takes off and flies through the air. There's really something honest about it, and compared to what we see today. So can you tell us some more about the preparations for turbo boosts? You had a lot of knowledge from the Dukes of Hazzard that you did back in '79. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. I did over 100 episodes of Dukes of Hazzard, and in that show, we kind of revolutionized the car jumping industry, which nobody had really seen that before, except in Smokey and the Bandit. Smokey and the Bandit jumped, the Trans Am across a bridge that was out, and nobody had ever really seen a jump of that magnitude. And so when we got in Dukes of Hazzard, it was kind of a learning curve to try and see just how far we could jump the car. And I took all of that knowledge from Dukes of Hazzard and moved into Knight Rider. Yes, it's a different kind of car. We had different suspension and different weights and everything, but the ability of the car to jump was essentially the same. And so I used the same ramps, and then I started building on kind of making the ramps a little bigger and a little longer so that we could do different things with the car. And that was the great part about learning on Dukes of Hazzard, is by the time I got to Knight Rider, I had all the basic knowledge and I could build on it for the show. And so we did things on Knight Rider that were a lot more dangerous than what we did on Dukes of Hazzard, because we were working in a city as opposed to Dukes of Hazzard, which was working in the country. And I jumped the Knight Rider car in, downtown LA and in West Covina, California, and in places, between alley to alley that was really, really dangerous, because, you're in an alley with only 2 or 3 feet on either side of the car, and you've got to land in another alley on the other side, and you've only got 2 or 3 feet. And if you miss, you're hitting a building at 75 miles an hour. Excuse me, let me just get some water.
Yeah, I'm making you talk a lot here. It's so exciting.
But that was the great thing about jumping the car, is that, being in a city kind of background, it was totally different than Dukes of Hazzard. And, the Knight Rider car came apart on the other side, and I can remember jumping from alley to alley in West Covina, and when I hit the other side, the entire steering column broke off and landed in my lap, and I had no steering, but the fact that I'm in an alley, the car just bounced back and forth between the alley walls, and I was okay. So, you just never know what's going to happen with the car.
The ramps that you used, were they ordinary ramps, or were there any modifications making the car fly higher, or how did you construct the ramps?
Well, it varied. They were usually 36 inches high and 14 to 18 feet long. And we varied the height, maybe 6 to 8 inches higher or lower to get what we wanted. And you had to have at least 14 to 16 feet long to get the car to bounce up in the air like we wanted. It's called a compression ramp. And the great part about that is that it bounces the car up in the air and you don't have to carry a lot of speed. So my speed ranges were anywhere between 65 and 75 miles an hour. And, there were a lot of things that made the car jump like it did. And I'm not going to get into specifics, but you can't just take a stock car with those ramp dimensions and hit that ramp and do what we did in Kit, because I did a lot to the suspension and a lot to the way the car was built to make it fly flat through the air. And the great part about the Knight Rider car was that, having such a small ramp, and it was a small ramp, is that we could hide things around that ramp and the public never saw it. We'd put bushes around it or dirt around it. And one of the key factors that we did is we put a mirror and cut it exactly the same as the ramp, and then put it in the side angle of the ramp and tilted it toward the ground. So when the camera saw the ramp, it's looking at a mirror and what it sees is the ground. So if you understand that, you're looking at a mirror that's looking at the ground, and so it takes the ramp away. It just looks like Kit just jumped up in the air, and it was miraculous.
Yeah. Was there any? You talked about cars for different things, and as I understand it, there was a lot of modifications made to the turbo boost cars. How did how did you protect yourself when flying through the air, and not least when hitting the ground when you were in the car?
Well, back on the Dukes of Hazzard days, before we did Dukes of Hazzard, a bunch of stunt people had broken their backs trying big, car jumps like they did in Smokey and the Bandit. And a lot of my friends had broken their backs bad. And we had started jumping Dukes of Hazzard with just a regular, protective jump seat and a 5-point safety harness, which was shoulder straps, a lap belt, and what we call a crotch belt, which is another belt that goes from the middle of your suspension system down to the ground. And people were still getting hurt. So on Dukes of Hazzard, Jerry Summers and Bob Orison and myself and a couple of the stunt guys started talking about a big jump that I was going to do, which I was going to jump the car through a barn. And so they came up with this jump harness. And this jump harness was a corset that you wear around your rib cage that doesn't incorporate your rear end. It just goes around your rib cage like a women's corset, but it has straps over the top of your shoulder, and then you strap yourself into bungee cord that attaches you to the roll cage in the car, which is the top of the car. Once you get these bungee cords on your shoulder straps, you tie them as tight as you can. The stunt guys then push you down into the seat, stretch the bungee cords, and then put your 5-point safety harness on, which then it kind of keeps your body in the middle of the car. When you hit the ground hard, the bungee cord keeps your rear end from smashing into the ground and breaking your back, and the 5-point safety harness keeps your head from hitting the ceiling. So it was really a fantastic thing to invent, and I used that on Knight Rider for every single jump I did. And in today's world, we're still using it today with no modifications.
Wow. Okay, coming to also I have a question on scrapped turbo boosts. There was a lot of miniature work in when we got to the second season, but during some of the miniature turbo boosts, we actually see what at least looks like a real car landing. Do you remember making some maybe not huge turbo boosts where you only needed the car to land?
Yeah, one of the things that happened is the studios started trying to put miniatures into, the real world. And, as much as I like to say there were some things that we couldn't do, I thought the miniatures kind of took us out of the moment. and they looked so fake that, the audience knew they weren't a real car. And I think that's the problem that lies with, if you, as an audience member, feel that it's not real, you lose all the energy that we had built up in the car chase, and you just are not interested anymore. So we fought with the studio, week after week after week, trying to get them to stop doing miniatures. And the only, I guess the only thing that they really gave us when they started doing miniatures and saying, okay, you can do the takeoff of the jump and the landing of the jump, and we'll do the fly through the air. And so we fought with them for, probably 6 months until we went back to doing real jumps again. Yeah. And I don't know whether it was a monetary issue. I don't know what the reasoning was behind it, other than I know it was cost effective for them. I know it was a lot cheaper than doing it, because you just had a little miniature car. You could do it 1,000,000 times, but it didn't look real. And that's kind of the same thing we do on Fast and Furious, is that the minute you take the people out of a real car, you've lost the audience. And so that's why on the Fast and Furious franchise movies, we try and do everything as real as possible, because you want everybody to feel like they're in the car and they're experiencing it. That's what we wanted with Knight Rider. We want everybody to feel like they are Michael Knight. They're the ones driving the car. And that's the great thing about keeping people interested, is that they have to be in the car with you.
Okay, coming to the molecular bonded shell, Kit could drive through almost anything without getting hurt. How did you do that in practice? Yeah.
Well, we built, initially we didn't have any way of doing it. And every time somebody came up and kicked Kit or hit it with a baseball bat, we had to film it in a way that you couldn't see the damage. And then at about the end of, or middle to end of the second year, we found a way to put a plastic or rubber body over the top of the real body. And it was one that was a full-size body that we lifted with a forklift and dropped it down over the top of the real body. And it was rubber. And you could hit it with a baseball bat and kick it and jump on it. And all it really did was bend the real steel underneath the car, but the audience couldn't see the damage. So that really helped us a lot for things that we wanted to do. Like I could come up and bounce against another car, and you never really saw any damage to Kit, but you could see damage to the other car, because the rubber could take, any kind of damage like that without really seeing it. One of the things that happened on the set was that I didn't have the rubber body on the car, and a bunch of kids got off of a school bus and came over and started beating on Kit and smashing it. And obviously it got all bent up, and they couldn't really understand why. So, those things happen, but the rubber body really helped us a lot for doing the things that we needed to do to make the car look like it was, completely indestructible.
Yeah. Also, I think the blind drive, you need to tell us some more about the blind drive, because it has always got me mesmerized when Kit comes around the corner flying and there's no one in the car. Yeah, there is, that. Tell us a bit about that.
That was kind of us getting together, trying to figure out how to make it work. Because prior to the blind drive seat, that we all kind of got together. It wasn't just me. It was me and, the effects guys and our car builder. And we all kind of got together and said, how do we make this work? Because we can't drive with cameras, because with cameras, you don't have any sense of depth perception. And you need to be able to have depth perception to be able to stop the car on a mark and to find out where you are on the road. And we had tried a million different, like they even strapped people underneath the car, and you'd look out the front bumper, you'd be laying completely prone underneath the car, and it got very hot, and you're inches from the pavement trying to drive this car, and that didn't work. So the blind drive seat was something we came up with, that we could figure if we made the seat just wide enough for me to get up inside of it, we could hide the width of it behind the B pillar of the car, which in the Knight Rider car, it was the piece of metal that sat right next to your shoulder. Yeah. That's the B pillar. So we would push the seat back so that the width of the seat, I'm hidden behind that piece of steel, and all I'm looking out is the little black mesh thing that sits in the seat. And so I really couldn't see left and right much, but I could see forward and I could see over the dash. And so I have depth perception. So what I would do each time I had to blind drive the car is I would drive sitting up in the seat normally, drive what I had to drive sitting up in the seat, know where the parameters are, and then now get inside the seat, do a half speed rehearsal, and then do a full speed rehearsal, and then get the job done. And then once I got kind of used to blind driving the car, sometimes I didn't really even need a rehearsal outside the seat. I would just do it normally because I'm so used to being inside the seat. But when I started, directing the action unit, my brother had to get used to it. And it is hard to get used to because you've got the steering wheel pushed back 2.5 feet to you. You've got the accelerator pedal and the brake pedal pushed back 2.5 feet to you. So you're essentially driving from the back seat. And so you really can't see over the nose that easily, but you get used to it. It's not the easiest thing to do, but the fact that I got used to it quick, we started writing in more things for Kit to do when he doesn't have Michael Knight in the car. And so I had to do mini ramp jumps with it. So I had to figure out how to get a helmet inside the blind drive seat. And I would do reverse 180s and 180s inside the car and slide around corners and hit other cars. And so we found a lot more we could do with the blind drive seat than what we originally thought we could do. Because originally all they really wanted me to do was come up, and pick up Michael Knight and drive away. And so we made a right side drive car. And I love the fact that we built on it each and every year to make it do more and more things. It was just something that was a lot of fun. But when you have 2.5 feet of extension steering wheel back in your lap, a lot of times that 2.5 feet couldn't take the impact of a mini ramp jump, and the entire thing would break apart and end up in my lap on the other side. And there just was no way to make it. When you have that much extension, there's no way to make it really, substantially safe. You just knew it was going to break off, and you hoped that on the other side you could stop the car before you hit anything.
Yeah. Super Pursuit mode. Were you in any way involved in that? When you look at the show today, it just seems like that that they speeded up the footage.
They did, and they learned that from another show. Right as Knight Rider was coming out, there was another show that had a guy driving around in a Lamborghini Countach, and they speeded it up and went down to 6 frames a second, which we normally shoot at 24 frames a second. And so this was a quarter of that, which made the car look really, really fast. And so Knight Rider kind of built on that and said that as long as when I'm in the Super Pursuit mode, I drive the corners nice and smoothly. I don't break the back end out. I don't drive around. Just drive as fast as you can smoothly. When they drop the frame rate down, the car looks fast. It looks a lot faster than normal traffic. And then traffic around me would drive half their speed. So it looked like I was going by them a lot faster than what normally is. Now, I got to say that when we first built the Super Pursuit mode car, when I got this thing up to 80 and 90 miles an hour, the wings started coming off the car and everything was flying off. So they had to really build things a lot more beefy than what they thought, because they didn't really realize I was going to be going that fast. Sometimes if it was just a straight run by the camera on a straight road, I'd be doing 120 miles an hour, and those wings couldn't handle that kind of velocity. So, they ended up building things a lot beefier than normal, but it was always, forgot how many switches I had to push to make everything come out. But usually I would do a shot of each and every, piece of the car coming out. The nose would extend, the back wings would come out for brakes. It was all different things that they had designed to make the car look faster, but under cranking the camera is what really made it look like it was going really fast.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're coming towards the end now. If I could hear your view on the involvement of the show. What do you think of the show? Towards the end, there's been a lot of talk about it was money, it was budget. Finally, meaning that Knight Rider was taken off the air and then the show ended. What is your view on the success of the show, and you can say the fact that the success didn't last much more than 4 years?
Well, back then and back in the 80s, 4 years was a long time for an action series. Most TV series didn't go that long unless you were a sitcom, a comedic little sitcom that was easy to make, because mostly Knight Rider's expensive. It's an expensive show to make. And so, most studios are looking for new things where they can try and revamp and get a new audience and all of that. In today's world, Knight Rider would have gone 10, 15 years because they want a built-in audience. They want an audience that they can depend on each and every week to keep watching the show. So in the 80s, 4 years was a long time for us. That was a long time. I would love to see Knight Rider revamped because I think it's got an audience in today's world. I think it would be a little darker. It would be a little darker Knight Rider, but I think that's kind of like the way they did Batman. Batman was not a comedy when they made it a feature film. I think Knight Rider, if it became a new TV series, I didn't really like the revamped TV series that they made. They weren't really Knight Rider-ish. They were just kind of something new that kind of followed along the lines of Knight Rider. I think if you remade it, you'd want to stick with what Knight Rider did. You could supersede and make the car a lot different and a lot more updated, but it should be a little darker. It should be a little darker show. And if you did a feature film, you'd go along the same lines. It had a great idea. He's fighting crime and he's using the car as, a companion. And I think you'd have an audience for today's world, but it's just tough because in today's world, you've got to catch them very quickly. And I think, David's the one that's really pushing for it. And I think he'll probably get it. And I hope that I'm part of it when we do it, because I think you could have an audience that built in every single week, and you could probably take this for 10 years easily.
Yeah. So any thoughts of the end of the show? We're all, I think, devastated. I was 10 when it ended. We only got to see it, I think, 12 episodes on Danish television in 1986. I was 10 at that time. We got all the 90 episodes in 1993, 94 or so. So it took really long time. I've seen it all in German dubbed in synchronized language. But what were the talk of the crew once it got canceled?
Well, that was the hard part about it, is because each and every year we always had a Christmas party. We always celebrated events, and we always celebrated kind of events together. And even after each episode, we would always have at the end, the last day of each episode, everybody would get together and you'd either say goodbye to the cast that was not coming back the next week, or you would say, hey, this was a great episode. And we would show clips of some of the jumps that we did and some of the comedy bits that happened. And that was the great part about Knight Rider, is that everybody wanted to be there. Nobody really wanted to go home that quickly. And usually on the last day of each episode, your wives or your girlfriends or all your family would come out on the last day of the last episode to have that little dinner with you, see everybody on the show, say goodbye to everybody. So we were saying goodbye every week to people that were not going to come back the next week. When we got to the last episode of the last of the series, it was really a downer because everybody knew we weren't coming back. And that was the tough part about it, is that, everybody was crying and everybody was saying, oh my God, I can't believe I'm not going to see you anymore. And nobody could understand why they didn't want to keep the show going, because the ratings were still pretty high at that point. And it was all about money and the studio trying to find a different kind of idea to build on to get another audience. Like I said, they wouldn't do that in today's world. They'd stick with what they've got because they had a built-in audience. So I think that's the hard part about it, is that, that last day of the last episode was really difficult for all of us. And I still, see a lot of the same people that I worked with day in and day out, and I still see David all the time. But, a lot of people have passed away. Our director of photography has passed away. And it's things that, you get to a point where I would love to do a new Knight Rider TV series or feature and get back with a lot of the same people. I know our hair and makeup people would come back in a second. And, the prop guys would come back in a second. A lot of the effects guys are still alive. It'd be great to get all those people back together and do another TV series or feature. And I think we could get it together and have a great audience.
Okay. With that as the last comment, at least until I turn off the recording of this interview, thanks so much, Jack Gill. It's been an honor that you wanted to take the time to talk about this. You know that we are a lot of Knight Rider enthusiasts out there. So thanks a lot.
And now, while we listen to Joe's selection of Knight Rider music that we received directly from Don Peake himself, we'd like to thank these Patreon supporters. Look at you guys scrolling up the screen to my right. Wait a minute, how can you tell which side is my right since you can't see me because I'm not on camera? Oh well, you know what I mean. We're featuring these fine supporters at our Knight Rider Prop Restorer level. Thank you very much for your support. And for those of you at the Knight Rider History Hunter level, we're recognizing you right now in the description. Now, if you enjoyed seeing this golden nugget of Knight Rider history being rescued from obscurity, then please consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support would empower us to bring you even more of these historical nuggets. We are the Knight Rider Historians. Till next time, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.